I just got done rereading A Farewell to Arms for what is probably like the 8th time that I have read the book. It's definitely above 5. It's lower than 10. 7.5 is not an option, although I probably have half read this book at some stage in my life. So let's go with 7.5 times I've read this book. If I had to choose a book to reread every year for the rest of my life, A Farewell to Arms might be in contention, Like, it's pretty good. So my talk about this beautiful but dismal book, I'll try to be happy while I'm talking about it, although it's very difficult because the content that you're talking about informs the tone, the timbre, the mood of your speaking. I'm gonna try to not let that inflect or to reflect in my analysis of this book. I'm going to fail. Why I like this book? I like it because it's a love story, and I don't like romances in general because romances, the happily ever after Disney style of romances, yes, they are nice. Hallmark Channel, nice, right? Those happily ever after endings don't haunt you and they don't stay with you. And this ending definitely haunts you, definitely stays with you, will probably keep you up at night. It's a love story between two very flawed individuals, flawed but relatable individuals. I can see myself in both Henry and Catherine. A lot of times Henry knows exactly what he needs to do and just neglects to do it. And what is more relatable than that? Catherine at the beginning of the book comes across as manic, a little bit unstable, but later on in the book we see that's just a process of grieving, and she really wants to lose herself in Henry. This is a big part of the book too, a big theme of the book. A Farewell to Arms. Henry abandons the Italian army, so he's saying goodbye to war. But in much the same way, Henry and Catherine are saying goodbye to the world through their relationship together. So they want to lose themselves in the other person, and they want to completely abandon the outside world and lead this insular, isolationistic life together. Isolationist. That's the word that I'm looking for. Yeah. What makes this even more powerful is that at the end of the story, of course, Catherine dies in childbirth. So does the baby. But that introduction of the third party, that introduction of the other person into this very close-knit, sort of codependent love between Henry and Catherine almost breaks the relationship apart. It ruins it. It dissolves it. Their love is very Romeo and Juliet-esque. It's very naive. They're both ingenues. They don't really understand exactly what they're up against. This is an anti-war novel, but it's not an anti-war novel in the same way that All Quiet on the Western Front is. In that novel, in contrast, Remarque wants to browbeat you. He wants to shock you into horror and disgust with the war. And there are some graphic scenes in this book, obviously, right? So there's the man who bleeds out over Henry in the ambulance. There's Henry's injury in his leg. There's the shooting of Amo during the retreat. But that's really not the point of the book. The point of the book is not to shock you into the horrors of war. It's more to wear you down and to present the ennui and the boredom and the tedium of war, right? Hannah Arendt has this great quote, the banality of evil, meaning that evil is stupid in the way that it operates. We understand it, and yet we're helpless to stop it. And Henry understands the nature of warfare. He understands that it is fundamentally pointless and that it just leads to the death of innocence, but he's helpless to stop it, and he feels like a pawn in it. Rain throughout this novel is stereotypically thought of as a symbol of death, but I also think it's just a symbol of the eroding, abrading, slow drip, drip, drip of war that crushes the souls of the characters, that slowly erodes away their faith and joy and all happiness that they have. I'm saying that happily. Spring in Milan, when Henry is recovering from his leg injury in Milan in the hospital with Catherine. This is a beautiful section of the book. It reminds me of what being young and in love feels like. And that is why we read, or that is in part why we read. That's one of the great joys of reading. And so you should read the book just for that. Hemingway's language and style is another part of the book that I like very much. Hemingway is known for his iceberg approach to writing, in the sense that What's on the page is only the tip of the iceberg. What is below that is this whole mass of meaning and emotion and everything that you really need to intuit or read into. It's not explicitly stated, it's only hinted at, and I love that aspect of it. I also like the dialogue in the book. If you're new to Hemingway, you might be put off by the dialogue. You might think it's strange or bizarre or maybe a little bit too full of machismo, which it is. But there's also this underlying humor that you need to, or that I suggest you try to hear in the book. There's this underlying humor where I imagine all the characters are sort of elbowing each other after they say anything, and they're saying like, la 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 la, that was a joke. And so if you can read the book with that in mind, I think it helps you to understand the dialogue a lot more. A couple other things about the style. I like the interior shift that Henry experiences. Hemingway is known for his journalistic, just the facts style. But often in this book, Henry has this interior shift where he goes into almost this dreamlike stream of consciousness reflection on how he feels and the nature of the world. I also like that the foreshadowing in the book is abundant. It's rife with foreshadowing, but the foreshadowing doesn't feel too ham-fisted. It doesn't feel too heavy or obvious. You notice it at the end of the book and when you reread the book, but you don't notice it in the flow of the narrative, which I appreciate. And finally, I think the auxiliary or the secondary characters in the novel are great. Rinaldi is wonderful. He's ribald, irreverent, bawdy, very funny, except for when he starts dosing himself with mercury because he thinks he has a venereal disease, and then he becomes somewhat dark. But again, that reflects on the nature of war and how it wears him down. I think it's more so that instead of the mercury poisoning, but I've never been poisoned with mercury, so I don't know. It could be that. I also think that Greffy is one of the more interesting auxiliary characters in the novel. He's this 90-ish year old man who drinks champagne and plays pool with Henry, and he is portrayed as being somewhat enlightened, a sage. He reminds me of the Count in The Sun Also Rises. Mippopolis is his name. Both of the characters here, Greffy and Mippopolis, seem to possess this understanding of how the world works and this sort of casual hedonism where they're enjoying the fruits of the world and not really worrying about death because they know that it's going to come for them, but they're not really concerned because they've lived a long and fruitful life, and now they're just sort of living out the petering out of their days in luxury and style. Every time I read this book, I like this analogy. It's like climbing into a bed of clean sheets. It's refreshing, it's cool, it's welcoming, it's inviting. Thank you for watching. I am so didactic. Can someone just please stop me from being so didactic? And yet, it is the source of my power and also my Achilles heel. I drone. This is droning. Am I droning? Yeah. Sorry.